Assalamualaikum, brothers and sisters. I would like to remind all of you in the hall to kindly put your phone into silent mode and to kindly Carol, saya takut dia risau dia lupa sign dia. Full house tu apa? Full house. Lepas baca doa, presentation.
Kau buat video. Kita punya yang video sibuk yang penting. You on video eh? Tak ada, you tak video, tak ada. Just video je.
Macam mana nak sama ada pihak?
Sama shoot dia siapa? Mana abang tu? Mana abang Samsul tu?
Dia akan Khairul mana? Dia orang dijaga.
Ni pakai ni kan, slide je kan?
Yeah, slide je. But we're just wondering how to transition from your video to the slide.
Lepas video kita, you tak masuk sini tadi?
Tak masuk.
Video?
Dari video
Dr. Zalia bagi speech dia.
Sekejap. Where is our video?
Lepas doa.
Okay, nah boleh. Because first we will have our video. After that, Datuk Sri Zaliha akan cakap. So masa tu we can
bila saya keluar ni, saya terus tekan sini. So sebelum tu saya akan pergi kat video ni.
I nak pergi belakang.
I akan tekan dulu, and then I just go to position, and then you take over.
Mak Khairul.
Saya takut yang ni nanti dia.
When will brother?
11.10 tengok jam ni sekarang.
Brother tu nama?
Azri.
Aziz datang sini kan? Datang sini kan?
Saya minta dia stand by. Saya pergi lalu.
Ain tak duduk kat sini kan? Apa tak buat sini?
Mana? Dah sekarang. Announcing the arrival of Tan Sri Dato' Azman Mokhtar, the Managing Director of Khazanah Nasional Berhad, accompanied by Director of International Islamic University Malaysia, Professor Datuk Sri Dr. Zaleha Kamaruddin. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Honorable Tan Sri Dato' Azman Haji Mokhtar, Managing Director of Khazanah Nasional Berhad, Honorable Professor Datuk Sri Dr. Zaliha Kamaruddin, Rector of the International Islamic University Malaysia, Honorable Professor Dr. Abdul Aziz Berguth, Deputy Rector Internationalization and Industry and Community Relations, Advisor for the Premier Lecture, Honorable Senior Management of Khazanah Nasional Berhad, IIUM University Management Committees, Honorable Professor Dr. Amir Akramin, Director, Office of Industrial Links, Chairperson of the Premier Lecture, Deans and Directors, Brothers and Sisters, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning and welcome to the Premier Lecture CEO at Faculty Program 2016. Before we start our program, I would like to call upon Ustaz Ramadan Subki from the Office of Sultan Haji Ahmad Shah Mosque to recite the dua.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Allahumma antas salam wa minkas salam wa ilayka ya'udus salam fahayyina rabbana bis salam wa adkhilna al jannata daras salam tabarakta rabbana wa ta'alaita ya dhal jalali wal ikram. O Allah, the compassionate, the merciful, grant us peace and iman, safety and Islam, and guidance to perform all that you please. O Allah, guide this ummah to do the best. Bless this ummah to be loving and compassionate. Help this ummah to spread good and peace to all mankind. O Allah, bless all of us today in this lecture. Make it a stage for further prosperity and progress, and be of great benefit and contribution to the development of our people in Malaysia and the whole of the Ummah. O Allah, may this day be of ours be better than yesterday. May our tomorrow be better than today. Please grant us positive outcomes in all of our endeavors. Save us from the disappointment both in this world and the hereafter. اللهم اجعل جمعنا هذا جمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا من بعده تفرقا معصوما ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين تقبل الله منكم.
Amin ya Rabbal Alamin. Thank you, Ustaz Ramadan. Ladies and gentlemen, now we will show you the official CEO at Faculty Program video montage presentation.
Saya ucapkan terima kasih juga CEO-CEO yang menyumbang masanya. Saya difahamkan dijanji 15 jam setahun, tapi sekarang dah tambah 30 jam. They are not complaining. They are willingly contributing their expertise, their knowledge kepada pelajar-pelajar kita.
Without further delay, I have the pleasure to invite Honorable Professor Datuk Sri Dr. Zaleha Kamarudin to deliver her welcoming remarks.
Thank you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Honorable Tan Sri Datu Azman Haji Mokhtar, Managing Director of Khazanah Nasional Berhad, Professor Dr. Abdul Aziz Bergut, Deputy Rector Internationalization and Industry and Community Relations, cum Advisor for the Public Lecture, Honorable Senior Management of Khazanah Nasional Berhad and IIUM University Management Committees, Professor Dr. Amir Akramin, Director of Office of Industrial Links, cum Chairman of the Public Lecture Working Committee, Deans and Directors, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning to everybody. Alhamdulillah, with the grace of Allah, we are gathered here for the CEO faculty lecture on sensible, real and Islamic finance. And to the surprise of the advisor that many turned up, today although only 200 are targeted. So there are standing room which extended to our Senate Hall. And if you can't stand, you can just sit in the hall to hear the lecture, which we are having live streaming to show proof, evidence of Tan Sri's existence in our university for the CEO faculty talk. We are happy to invite Tan Sri Azman to be here. He is our alumni. Can we give him an applause, please? He is so lucky enough to be part of us, part of the IIUM My Family, and he has been doing at that time postgraduate diploma in Islamic Studies. Right. Now, the CEO faculty program is one of the Ministry of Higher Education's flagship programs with the main objective of exposing the academic community, especially students, to successful professional practices. I think that's the reason why you are here today, because I think 100% of your time are hearing lectures coming from academics. So this is one of the times when we call people from the industry to share their experiences. For your information, currently there are 60 CEOs from various companies taking part in the program, as mentioned by Yang Amat Berhormat Prime Minister. They have to spend about 30 hours at the universities where they are appointed. But for Tan Sri Azman, there is a special arrangement made with then KSU, Dato Sri Zaini Ujang, that he will travel the country to all the 30, I think 20 public universities, and he has come out with a booklet on or the title is not there, but he will give the title later on, where he will share one secret of his success with us. The public lecture today, as you know, is by Tan Sri Datu Azman Mokhtar, the Managing Director of Khazanah Nasional Berhad. Tan Sri Datu Azman will be talking on the topic of real, sensible and Islamic finance. Tan Sri Mokhtar, as I mentioned, is our alumnus, where he graduated from IUM with postgraduate diploma in Islamic Studies. About a month ago, IIUM signed an MOU with Synergy C Sendirian Berhad, a subsidiary of Khazanah Nasional Berhad, to collaborate on various programs, including research and development projects. IIUM and Synergy are proposing to develop a biogas project entitled Pilot Plant for Production of Biomethane from Co-Digestion of Food Waste and Local Biomass as Low Carbon Fuel for IIUM Vehicles. Prof. Wira is here. Prof. Wira is the Dean of Kuliah of Engineering. I believe that this project goes to Kuliah of Engineering. Prof. Wira is one of our renowned professors who has been a Vice Chancellor of 3 universities, and we are honored to have him with us. Betul tu Prof. This project has the planned capacity to turn 24-ton waste per day into 315 kilowatt of electricity of biomethane. I'm trying to pronounce it. Being a legal person, this is out of my area totally. Or 105, how do I pronounce it? Meter cube. That's the cubic meter of biomethane. Today is a learning curve for me. Now, this project is the extension of the fundamental research project and knowledge transfer, or what they call KTP, that were conducted in a smaller scale with grants from the Ministry of Higher Education. We'd like to thank Synergy for assisting us in the research. I would also like to share with our guests today the Asafa Fund, an endowment fund contributed by our alumni of the university for needy students. Currently, we are sponsoring more than 5,000 number of students, and hopefully we can sponsor many more students. Last Friday or last 2 Fridays, we have also launched what we call Knowledge Hjkff. For a start, Alhamdulillah, I'm happy to note that we managed to collect 200,000 from our staff, from salary cuts, and this comes from our staff who are able to come for our Usrah launching that day. But we are going to have more, and we hope to gather about 1 billion to help our needy students, which actually we are emulating University Al-Azhar. University Al-Azhar, which is already more than 1,000 years. We are only 33 years old, but we hope as a young university, we are able to do it. Asafa Fund is organizing a charity dinner. Those who are alumni, now we have extended the definition of alumni to include not just those who have studied at this university, but those who have worked in whatever capacity at the university to be our alumni as well. So inshallah, all of you are invited to the charity dinner, which is to be somewhere in the second week of December. So I hope Prof. Aziz's office will communicate to all our alumni to buy tables during the charity dinner, which will be at the university, at our cultural center. Again, I would like to thank Tan Sri Dato' Azman Mohtar and team for accepting our invitation and share his experience with the students and academic community in IIUM. I think the front row, they are all professors, from Prof. Aslam to Prof. Atta Ulhaq Pramanik. Betul ke tu nama? I can even know your family. And I think the front row, the whole front row, from Prof. Amir to Datuk Rahim to Datuk Wan Hilmi, Datuk Wira, Prof. Wahab is the Dean of Kuliah of ICT, followed by Dr. Gary. Prof. Wahab is the Director of Alumni. Prof. Hidabi is with the International Division, and Dr. Jules Jasri. The rest are the second row are lecturers as well. Second row and the third row onwards and standing, including in the Senate Hall, another 200 waiting over there, but this is through live streaming and through whatever means is disseminated to our students. So we hope, inshallah, Tan Sri, you'll be coming again. So I'm making, I insist that you make your presence, perhaps inshallah next year, with more crowds coming in, because these are not made compulsory to our students. This is on their own accord and free will that they are here to hear your experience, which is very rare for you to come here. Very rare, because you are such a very busy person. So sharing your experience with us means a lot to us. With that, we thank you, and I finish off with like Terima kasih daun keladi. Kalau boleh ada masa datang lagi. Wallahu alam. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Honorable Professor Datuk Sri, for the welcoming remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored this morning to host a CEO at Faculty Program in International Islamic University Malaysia, which is a program inspired by the Ministry of Higher Education to bridge the gap between academia and the industry by bringing into the university CEOs, managing directors, and practitioners to enrich our teaching and learning environment. This morning, it is our pleasure to have with us Tan Sri Dato' Azman Haji Mukhtar, the Managing Director of Khazanah Nasional Berhad, to share his wisdoms and sound experience in the industry with our students, staff, and management. Before I hand over the floor to our distinguished speaker, please allow me to first introduce him. The highlight of the biodata of the Honorable Tan Sri is he is our alumnus. Tan Sri obtained his postgraduate diploma in Islamic Studies from this university. Tan Sri is the Managing Director of Khazanah Nasional Berhad since 2004. Tan Sri is also the Chairman of Iskandar Investment Berhad and Aziatal Group Berhad, as well as Trustee of Yayasan Khazanah and Khazanah. Without further ado, I would like to invite Honorable Tan Sri Dato' Azman bin Haji Mukhtar to deliver his lecture entitled Sensible, Real and Islamic Finance. Please welcome.
Terima kasih pengacara majlis. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashratul anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa ashabi ajma'in. Dear colleagues, Honorable Professor Datuk Sri Wan Zaleha, other one, sorry. Somehow I see Kelantan in front of me. Minta maaf. Tan Sri Zaleha, Datuk Sri Zaleha, whose husband is an old friend of mine actually from school, although we've not met for many years. Professor Dr. Abdul Aziz, Deputy Rector of Internationalization, Professor Dr. Amir Akramin, Director of Office of Industrial Links, very distinguished honorable professors. I'm somewhat nervous because I'm just a mere practitioner. So last night actually I changed the title to put the practitioner's perspective, because conscious I'm trying to bring coal back to Newcastle, as the saying goes. Speaking about Islamic finance to a very learned and distinguished audience. Deans and directors, my colleagues from Khazanah, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, it's truly an honor. It's a small homecoming because I managed, Alhamdulillah, Professor, to spend about a year. The old campus dekat section 16. I think I was in the second batch of the diploma in Islamic Studies lah, graduate diploma. Alhamdulillah, we would spend Saturday afternoons, and I believe the course director was Tan Sri Kamal Hassan. Tan Sri Kamal, as you will know better, I think is very distinguished, and I was very happy to be reunited somewhat. He accepted our invitation at Khazanah to speak at our Khazanah Mega Trends Forum several years ago on the topic of agreeing to disagree from various religious and ethical traditions, and of course Prof was representing our Islamic tradition. Jadi yang saya ingat actually Tan Sri Kamal, of course, very wise. The way he advises is of course in the right way. So he would say in the Dewan Kuliah tu kat belakang tu, to those at the back, when you stop meditating, you can wake up. So it wasn't easy because it was a Saturday afternoon in the days when you had to work, 5.5 days. To be honest, that's what I really remember from those lectures. But hopefully I remember a bit more because I was certainly in the meditation camp, I suppose. But mudah-mudahan, consciously, subconsciously, semi-consciously, it helps to shape our thinking. To give a brief background, like many, I studied finance and accounting from Western, so-called Western or conventional or whatever we call it, punya pathway lah. Hence, as I say, Alhamdulillah, UIA accepted me to complete my studies somewhat. And later, I went on to do a master's in development studies, actually, at University of Cambridge, who accepted me after Asian crisis. So after doing ACCA, CFA, Diploma Islamic Studies, the 98 Asian financial crisis was, really shaped the country and the region, and perhaps even the world, as I hope to discuss a little bit today. But on a personal note, it basically, from my standpoint at least, was there's more to life than finance, as indeed there is, of course. But dah dilorongkan, this is my field, which is in finance. And I decided to go and study and learn a bit more about a broader notion of development. And I asked Cambridge University at the start, a wonderful lecturer, Professor Gay Mix. Mrs. Mix wrote, actually Nicholas, who helped me to prepare this paper, yesterday we were discussing about Homo economicus, that means economic man, to just Homo sapiens, right, human being, insan, right, which is of course a very deep topic that Islamic scholars and other scholars have been looking at. So I asked, so development, which I was lucky enough to study in Cambridge, partly under the tutelage of several, including, I should acknowledge, one of my academic mentors, who is back now as a visiting fellow at Khazanah Research Institute, Professor Jomo, actually, suggested that, because we were debating the Asian crisis, so Jomo, as you know, very independent-minded, and I was head of research at Solomon Smith Bunny, the famous, or some may say infamous, American investment bank, and we were, to be fair, we were the financial advisors to the government of Malaysia in 1998, at the time when the whole world actually made Malaysia a financial pariah because of the capital controls. At the heart of this is a debate between, on the one side, the Asian crisis was accused to be the result of crony capitalism. On the other side, Asian crisis was accused to be the work of very bad and evil hedge fund managers. The truth, as we know, is a truth, but the truth is usually in between, quite strong positions in between. So here was I as head of research of Solomon, at one level advising the government, another level advising the markets, but also bringing the likes of IMF and World Bank to look for different points of view. And Professor Jomo was at that time at University of Malaya, whom I did not know. I had read his works, and cold call, he certainly had a different point of view, and we started actually meeting many times and discussing. So jadi when the time came, in the year 2000, I decided to go and study, leaving a very well-paying job, and decided I think there's got to study more. There's more that needs to be done. Jadi di Cambridge, when I asked, this is all very good, all these very eminent professors, etc. But I asked Mrs. Mix, since you wrote about not just economic men and women, but the term, as professors of economics will know, rational economic men, but what about just rational men, right? Where is the role of religion in all this? I asked, and she said, "Oh, I'm sorry, we don't do religion here," because this is Cambridge, right? Of course, alhamdulillah, in Cambridge though, I had the pleasure of, and the privilege of, on and off, I think, listening to the likes of Abdul Hakim Murad, Tim Winters, as you know, a very eminent scholar of Al-Ghazali. And I spent the summer after graduating in development studies actually trying to read. I think I managed to finish 3/4 Umar Chapra's book of the Future of Economics, published by Islamic Foundation in Leicester. I never got to Leicester until last season to watch football, but that's another story. But in between, the football game was about 2 hours. That I did visit Islamic Foundation for about 3 hours before that. Alhamdulillah. So the point is, today I hope to discuss an idea as one of the 12 ideas, as Datuk Sri Zaleha had highlighted. These 12 ideas came from a paper that I wrote with my colleagues several years ago when we were asked, please give us, this was Credit Suisse at a conference in Hong Kong, they asked, can you just give an after dinner talk and explain, how did you help to shape Khazanah lah? I said, first of all, benda ni work in progress, and secondly, I said, you really don't want to hear, there's a lot of very technical stuff all in our annual report. They said, no, give us your war stories, so to speak. So what we did was, we wrote this down in the form of ideas in the realm, and perhaps I thought the realm of ideas is maybe a suitable bridge between industry and academia that we can put out there for discussion. It's a work in progress, it's a practitioner's perspective. And indeed, as Datuk Sri Zaleha mentioned, my deal with Zaini, Prof. Zaini, Datuk Sri Zaini, is Zaini allow me to go around the country maybe not 20 IPTAs, but there's 12 ideas and 13 lectures, and to try and cover this since many friends and colleagues and classmates in various universities. So with that rather long backdrop, I just wanted to once again thank UIA, as I said, when you asked me to sign the visitor book. So I think the first thing that came to my mind was good to be back. Alhamdulillah. Thank you. So we prepared slides, which I will go through, and then if I may request, what I think we would really enjoy is to actually discuss Q&A somewhat with both professors and students, and if I can also invite some of my senior colleagues. Dato' Izani Ghani is our CFO. Izani is also an ACCA, but he works quite extensively in Islamic finance. I think I believe speaks at a lot of Islamic finance conferences, and really a practitioner and actually the person in charge, the Khazanah on Islamic finance. We also have a series of work that we do with Hjkff. Right up front, I would like to ask, if it's possible that we should work more closely dengan UIA, hopefully inshallah, and Dato' Izani is the person inshallah. Dato' Hisham is our head of research, investment research and strategy in Khazanah. My old colleague, we were both analysts in the 1990s, a period that we will discuss in a while, that resulted in basically finance going out of control. If you think it was bad 20 years ago, it's worse now, and God knows what's going to happen after what happened yesterday. So we all hold with bated breath. Tapi bolehlah discuss later. So Hisham also has duties in making investments, which is obviously the core work of Khazanah. At the back there, I think another executive director, Hjkff. In fact, I'm glad that Sri brought up the Synergy example, because I was just briefed recently, today actually, about the tie-up between Synergy and UIA. I understand, Farouk, from your note that it's a profit. We are going to save many millions a year. Jadi obviously, being more efficient, reducing wastage, helping the environment is extremely Islamic. And I believe UIA share is something like in the order of 1.7 million ringgit per annum savings. Farouk, correct? I got that right. So Dato' Wira, I hope we, inshallah, because in fact, right up front, I would cite this example of financing sustainable energy and renewable energy as being, very much a form of Islamic finance. In fact, it's much more, I think, than sukuks, which bila orang cerita Islamic finance, we typically talk about sukuks, which is basically liability side management, as opposed to risk sharing, equity side investments for a certain social utility, let alone sustainable punya utility. So I think right up front we already have one live example of this kind of a financing arrangement, if you like. So I think let me get to the heart of the presentation, distinguished audience. I thought my job today is to table, take this opportunity to first of all explain a little bit about Khazanah. I think being a Malaysian audience or people who are in Malaysia for quite a while, I think you know Khazanah. I think we are proud. I think the name, again, I'm before very distinguished professors. Last I counted, it means treasure in at least 12 languages. It is mentioned in the Holy Quran, as we know, Surah Hjkff. Of course, Khazanah, right? Managing a Khazanah is a very big amanah responsibility. We often say, we are often asked, who are the shareholders of Khazanah? The technical answer is Ministry of Finance, which is true. I think the better answer is 30 million shareholders, which is the number of Malaysians today, roughly. The even better answer is 30 million plus, because there are those who are not born yet, because we are holding that in trust, obviously. And the even better answer is the 30 million plus, because what about those who came before us that we are building this on top of? So this may be a very quick way of explaining how we view this. Of course, we work within a system. We are inspired by the words of a very eminent institution builder, Tun Ismail Ali, I think the governor of our central bank. I think Tun Ismail, I believe, was, whether this story is true or apocryphal, I'm not sure, but it's a good story, that he reminded that institutions need to be independent and strong, not of, but within government. And this is what we do, actually. We build, we try, I think a big part of our work is to try to build an institution that goes beyond individuals, goes beyond economic cycles or indeed political cycles, I think, in order to build a strong and autonomous institution, but within government, obviously, serving ultimately the people through the government of the day. I think this is what we are. The chairman is always, in fact, the founding chairman was Tun Dr. Mahathir, and the founding deputy chairman was Datuk Sri Anwar, as at that time the deputy prime minister and the finance minister. And further down, Pak Lah, actually he brought me in, kata Man, you buat macam ni, Pak Lah. So we worked. And then when Datuk Sri Najib, in fact, even when he was not yet prime minister, he was deputy and finance minister, he was already on our board, and then he took over, and actually we went and did even more. So let's get through the slides quickly, if I may, and then we'll probably be better to discuss. Can someone help to click, Nick? You cannot click? Okay, so what do? Keep on talking? Is this being distributed? Tidak. Okay, that's a good sign. Then I don't have to go through this slide. I think as we fix this, no, quickly, as I said, Khazanah, you know what we are. We are a so-called sovereign wealth fund of the country, but there's some technicality. The first one is actually, normally when somebody describes sovereign wealth fund, they refer to natural resource wealth, typically oil, and you see this in the Middle East, or they refer to surpluses that the country generates, typically represented by foreign exchange reserves, or they may refer to intergenerational wealth, pension money. Okay, so kalau you take examples like in Singapore, for example, GIC manages the CPF money. They also manage some of Monetary Authority of Singapore punya foreign reserves. Or if you look at CIC in China, they manage their forex reserves. Or if you look at Abu Dhabi Investment Authority, very large, or the Norwegian fund, they manage oil reserves. Khazanah does none of that actually. We don't get duit minyak, which is fine. It is being managed by a sister company, Petronas, of course, and managed well. Datuk Wan Zul, another old friend. Secondly, we don't get foreign exchange reserves because this is being managed by Bank Negara and managed well. And thirdly, it's okay now. And thirdly, pension monies, our pension money is being managed by EPF. So in other words, technically Khazanah as a SWF is a misnomer. It's not quite true. In fact, we call ourselves Strategic Investment Fund. Instead, we were given a bunch of assets after the Asian crisis, which were rather difficult assets. Can you go back to the road punya slide? Okay. As you can see, some major names from Malaysia Airlines to UEM, Celcom, Tenaga, CIMB, Axiata, etc. So major names that some were in trouble after the Asian crisis. That's when I was brought in. Alhamdulillah, we managed to restructure practically all of them. I think the one major exception is Malaysia Airlines, as you know. I think we've struggled to try and restructure that for various reasons. And sadly, I think it took the two major tragedies in 2014 to finally give us the conditions to restructure. And today, we have a 5-year program. We're about halfway through. And Alhamdulillah, I think it is well on track to recovery. A lot of pain, but I'm pleased to inform. For example, it was overstaffed, sadly, so we had to take out 6,000 people. Of the 6,000, I think roughly about 4,500 have been successfully redeployed, retrained, etc. The other 1,500, actually, some did not actually register with the retraining, and all of them were, we believe, fairly compensated. I think this is the kind of work we have to do. So we do touch every aspect of Malaysian lives in that sense. So our model, this is quite important to note. We don't get money coming in. We basically have a bunch of assets. Broadly, we've trebled the value of this asset, 3 kali ganda, over a space of about 12 years. That's how long me and my team have been doing this. In the process, we need to realize some of those proceeds and reinvest this into new areas. We have to try and anticipate which are the areas the country, Malaysia, needs to invest in for the future. So for example, into life sciences, into technology, we've been, alhamdulillah, one of the major investments we did several years ago was in Alibaba in China. Syukur alhamdulillah, we managed to make a gain of about $1 billion, and that $1 billion, about 3/4 of it we've realized. And now we've actually spread it in about 20 investments in technology around the world. Actually, we have offices in San Francisco, in London, in Mumbai, in Istanbul, and in Beijing. This is the kind of work we need to do. But also we do, for example, the development of a whole economic region. For example, Iskandar Malaysia is something that we needed to bring to the country and bring the right partnerships and right models. Job creation is a big part of our work. But we also need to do industrial restructuring. Next. Okay, a bit of a busy slide. We will this will be made available to everybody nanti. Jadi Khazanah, so to explain, we are only about 480 staff. I am quite clear we should not cross 500. We are almost full, because kalau more than 500, we'll probably create a lot of trouble. There'll be too many people, and we'll be probably doing things not so focused. So we have a cap at 500, which is fine. Our alumni is also about the same, 450. That means people are left, which we actively keep in touch. Of the 480 and the 450 who've left, we counted about 36. Datuk Sri Zaleha, you'll be pleased to know, UIA graduates, including myself. So alhamdulillah, we're very proud of that. And but this 480, actually, the various companies that we control is about 200,000 staff lah. So memang ramai. Okay, so we need to understand. It's about 80 major companies. Some of them are shown there. As mentioned, we've grown the portfolio from about 50 billion to 150 billion. We've trebled that at a level of risk that we think is fairly manageable, and it is not so easy. Perhaps if I can say, most funds, dia punya mandate are a bit more clearer. Not to say ours is not clear, it's just that ours is perhaps more complex. We need to show 3 kind of returns in Khazanah. Most funds just do 1. We need to make financial returns, we need to make economic returns, and there's a difference between financial return and economic return. For example, you can create financial return, however you may actually reduce jobs, for example. That or you may not acquire technology, you may lose control of technology, right? So that's not good enough. And the third part is societal returns. What does this mean in terms of society? How does this hit, for example, things that does not have an immediate financial or economic return? For example, education, as an example. Jadi, so our societal return, I think one, very simple, is actually make sure that we are financially sustainable, so that we're not a burden on the government, on taxpayers. So we have to conduct ourselves properly, obviously, so that we're not a burden, right? So before we can begin to be part of the solution, we must not be part of the problem. Jadi we make sure that we run this prudently, properly, and then generate a reasonable return that goes back to the government in terms of dividend. Many of our companies are held by EPF, PNB, Amanah Saham, Tabung Haji, and so on. So this goes directly back to the income of depositors, pencarum, and so on. Then yang kedua, we have actually an active corporate responsibility program. Alhamdulillah, that 150 billion would have been 153 billion, because several years ago, about 3-4 years ago, I persuaded my board that we had made good profits from our investment activity. We should put 3 billion ringgit, which we did, into a foundation. To call it a Hjkff, we did discuss with some scholars, but it's a bit technical, so it's basically an endowment and a trust, and we call it Yayasan Hasanah. Khazanah, of course, makes money. Hasanah helps to distribute this money in a way. So the 3 billion is an endowment. It generates at 5% roughly, and then some up, some down, about 150 million ringgit a year, and this finances, at least at last count, 23 NGOs and various things that we support in 5 areas. The largest one is in education, so scholarships and so on and so forth. We're doing research, macam-macam lah. So this is a whole big area. We've created a research institute because we felt there was a gap in discussion about important national economic issues. So the Khazanah Research Institute, in the space of 2 years, has been fairly visible. We thought there's so many things to answer, but if there's one thing we try to answer, is the issue of inequality. Macam mana, to help to answer this in its many forms. So that's why, for example, the first report called State of Households was really trying to put a data and database so that even if we are going to disagree and argue on all sides, we should agree and disagree on facts. So kena ada landing on facts. So today, I think people are referring on all sides, are referring to KRI punya data, which by the way is not rocket science. We are in a position to collate data and put data into a form, and we work with various parties, including some local universities as well. Second report was about housing, actually. Third report was about food. A fourth report was about social mobility, and so on and so forth. So this is funded, and they are working, but we also help policy formulation as an independent entity within government on many initiatives. I think frankly, whether our job is to come up with good, solid, robust research, and hopefully this is taken up, but obviously we are not the policy makers, as you can imagine. So this is only our third key, so to speak. First key, we must make money. I mentioned we've trebled the value of portfolio, translates to about 10.7% per annum. Second key, the economic returns. Okay, again, quite busy, tapi banyak lah. I think if I were to give an example, in Iskandar, I think we created a special economic zone. So we try to ask, what are the sectors that Malaysians can excel in? We believe many things. One example is the creative industries. We found that the work done on multimedia super corridor, for example, 25 years ago was good, but we were producing graduates from Multimedia University, which is one of our universities under Telekom Malaysia. But they were probably underemployed, tak cukup opportunities. So in the area of making movies or documentaries or games, for example, we found that Malaysian talent was actually very creative but had to leave the country. So we've created a creative industry cluster, the Iskandar. We've done and created, as I mentioned, Synergy is a good example of a renewable energy punya firm that wasn't quite there. In biofuels and life sciences and so on and so forth. So clearly this one, and technology and so on and so forth, right? So this one creates a lot of economic or strategic returns. We have a framework to measure this. It's not gone public yet. It's called Project Kronos, which tries to measure what we call true value. So it's not just a financial value, but the economic value and the societal value. Next. Okay, so terus, please. So as I mentioned, it would have been about 2-3 years ago, I was asked to speak, and the result of that is this document, which is actually structured as a speech, a very quick speech. In fact, at that time it was about 10 years, and it was called 10 Ideas lah. Sekarang dah tambah 2, which is about inclusion. Idea number 11 is inclusion, and idea number 12 is about innovation. So again, we know all these things. Now, within this, this is the 5th lecture, Datuk Sri. I've done 4. So anybody from Ministry of Education, please saya melaporkan diri. So my 30 hours being taken for attendance. No, I do this with great honor and pleasure. Jadi, it's a bit of a mouthful, sensible, real and Islamic finance. The reason is it was taken from a passage within the speech. Later it will be obvious. Jadi, those 3 returns, financial, strategic, societal, the question was, okay, we acknowledge you've done all this. Whether you can sustain remains to be seen, which is true. Whether this is really what you claim, fair point. Then they asked how did you do this, was basically the question, and I tried to answer this, in the realm of ideas lah, so to speak. So 12 ideas were highlighted. Yang pertama, performance. For example, the idea of performance may seem obvious, but it's not so obvious. 12 years ago, you've all heard about KPI. Of course, a lot of us joke ni KPI ke KOPI ke, etc. lah. Long story kan. And of course, wrong KPIs is worse than, or rather, worse than no KPIs, right? Because you may do the wrong things very well. Kalau the KPIs are wrong, right? So imagine. Jadi, but this was a story about performance, focus, and we talk about execute. Panjang cerita lah. I think this has been done. Kedua, again I won't delve into this, but micromanager versus macro manager. This is a bit of a corporate side of corporate governance, how we go about doing things. The third one I mentioned a bit. We are not quite a sovereign wealth fund. Some have called us a sovereign development fund, given our triple bottom line tadi, as I mentioned, right? Yang keempat is the subject for today. Yang kelima is about cities and economic density and approach to urbanization, urban development. Some of our work in Iskandar, but also other places. Number 6, I spoke in Kelantan on collective action. Not just competitive, but the idea of complementary advantage. This is the idea about collaboration and partnership. To those of you who study in the area of problem of the commons, collective action, prisoner's dilemma, I think this is the whole subject, which is quite a theoretical subject. But I think several years ago, Professor Ostrom, Eleanor Ostrom, won the Nobel Prize for her work in this area. And again, after yesterday, I think the world is going to need this even more so. How do you work together, right? Number 7 is about internationalization and the creation of regional champions. Several of our companies, I think, can fairly, you can see the UEM, Malaysia Airports, CIMB, Axiata, for example, a company I happen to chair, but Tan Sri Jamal Ibrahim runs it. We are now touching 300 million subscribers in about 8 or 9 countries. Not bad, considering Malaysia is only 30 million people. And when we started, about 12 years ago, we only had about 6 million. Today it's touching 300, but it's a tough industry. Mobile phone, semua orang guna WhatsApp, tak payah, tak payah apa-apa. Jadi, and then the balance between state and markets, which is a subject that economists will know in microeconomics, getting this balance between the role of the state and the role of markets is also, we are at the heart of that. Innovation and entrepreneurship is idea number 9, inclusion, sustainability, talent, culture and a learning organization. We presented this to UITM about last month. And number 12, and it's no coincidence, 11 and 12 is at the end. You can't do 1 to 10 unless you have 11 and 12, which is the talent, the culture and the learning organization. And number 12, about institutionalization, integrity and good governance. So all of the foregoing memang tak boleh buat unless asas ni ada. So that was the whole thing. So inshallah, I hope over a space of 3 years to cover this. So this is my 5th lecture, Datuk Sri, and indeed we will compile all this lah. Seterusnya, sorry. Actually, the bottom thing is important. If I can just go back, okay. So if you notice, the 12 ideas are color-coded into 3 areas: about mandate, about value creation, and about governance. As I mentioned, so mandate means doing the right things, right? So we got to choose. We can't do everything. So we're given a mandate. We negotiate the mandate actually with my board, with the Prime Minister, with the government. I say we need to do this because our overall mandate is, as I said, to serve the country and future generations, right? But we need to create value because without the value, we can't sustain all these things. So you got to do the right things right, and you got to do it in the right way, governance. So this is how we kind of split the ideas into 3 main buckets: doing the right things right in the right way. Hopefully, inshallah, after that with doa and tawakal, hopefully the right outcomes will come. I think this is basically our formula. So they ask what is the formula, this is our formula. There's no secret actually. Of course, we are some of these are aspirational, we're not there yet, and some of these, even if you kind of get there, you never really get there because the thing keeps on moving. Benda ni. Jadi anyway, it's a framework. Next. So, with respect to real, sensible, and this is a passage. It's a bit long in here, but it's in the booklet. First thing, it follows, therefore, because we are not a sovereign wealth fund in the classical sense, i.e., we do not receive regular inflows of money, right? We do not get duit minyak, we do not get the pension money, we do not get the reserves. We got all these assets, but yet we have to do this restructuring. Some of them take quite quick, within a year, but most of them take many years. Some of them take like decades even, which is not so good, but that's what it is. Therefore, we need to make sure the asset and liability balance is very strong. If something goes wrong, and later you will see, finance has meant that markets are actually very fragile, and we are an equity house. Jadi, market could drop 10, 20, 30%, as indeed in 2008, during the Lehman crisis, it dropped, I can't remember, 50% or thereabouts. So if we're not careful, our assets then cannot go and service some of our liabilities. We got to get this balance extremely right. That is, in a sense, the sensible part. We have to keep a very sensible and prudential punya measure. So we have a set of about 5, CFO, about 5 prudential measures ni memang we cannot cross. In fact, CFO will have this macam minyak punya indicator. Where are we? Hijau ke merah ke, or yellow in between, to make sure that we never cross this thing. Because others may be able to, for example, if you're down, you raise a new fund and cover the old fund. We can't do that. We can't do that kind of, because that's not what we are. On the other hand, if something goes down, we don't have a queue outside our head office, give me my money back. I just get a lot of block entries, kata apa khazanah ni pasal apa tak bayar, etc., which is so one of the key check and balance is every January, come rain, shine, haze, snow tak ada lah. we always announce our results, good or bad. We always announce every January. It's a discipline that keeps us on our toes, and tell the Malaysian public, because the issue of transparency on sovereign funds is also a big issue internationally. So I argue our transparency standards are as good as anyone else, if not better, inshallah. The second area is real finance and Islamic finance, adopt Islamic finance and co-investment model. Now, upfront, at the heart of the issue of finance is actually what? It's actually a decoupling between the role of finance, as many of you know here. The real role of finance is actually as a means to go and fund economic activity for societal good, for social justice, and so on and so forth. This is the role of finance. Tapi dah terbalik. Financial Times may say a lot of things. Their tagline is, we live in financial times, right? Ini dia punya advert. Actually, they're right. We do live in financial times. I'm reminded by a meeting I had, Sheikh Lorenzo. Some distinguished professors may know Sheikh Lorenzo is a practitioner and an academician in Islamic finance from the United States. I think his son was actually working for our Securities Commission. So he popped by my office several years ago, and while having a cup of tea, he explained, he said, Azman, this I'm learning from the Sheikh. The Sheikh reminded, he said, you are in finance, this is very important work because we live in financial times. I said, Sheikh, you sound like the FT. I said, yes, I do sound like the FT, but it's true. And he went on to remind that he said the prophets from, they were given mu'jizat, gifts, that were consonant with their times. So of course, Nabi Musa alayhi salam, Allah Ta'ala gave him the gift of magic, because at that time, magicians were the big guys, right, around the Fir'aun, right? So the magician, so of course he had to be the best magician with Allah's will. Nabi Allah Isa, at a time when there was a lot of disease, was given the gift of healing with Allah's grace, right? And of course, Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was given the Quran, among other things, the mu'jizat, the greatest mu'jizat, at a time when, of course, Arab society valued poetry, and of course, they live in the desert, and therefore, natural phenomena and the ability to describe, you combine that with poetry, was a sign of his prophethood, obviously. Yeah? So, of course, we live the akhir zaman, there's no more prophets, but we have, of course, the holy book and the sunnah. And indeed, the Sheikh reminded that you practitioners in finance, because the world has been financialized. And this idea that finance has decoupled itself from the real economy is really at the heart of the issue of our times. Without overextending myself, I think 2016 will be the year. Last night I read, I'm not a betting man, we make investment, we don't make bets per se, but apparently if someone had put £5 sterling into 3 events, they would have made 15 million this year. What were the 3 things? 1, Brexit, of course, as we know. 2, yesterday's events. I cannot even bring myself to name his name. I'm a father. We have 2 children in the United States. 1, a girl in a hijab on the West Coast. Please make dua for her and the Muslim community and everyone else over there, because naturally we're worried. But the 3rd event was Leicester City winning the Premier League. So if you combine those 3 on an accumulator, these so-called black swans that are not supposed to happen are happening. And I submit one of the reasons is the system that we have built is fundamentally fragile. It is not on sound ground. And this system is finance, actually. I came from a financial background, ACCA, CFA, and I can tell you, to be fair to the great, in fact, they were not called economists, they were called moral philosophers. Adam Smith, to be fair, Adam Smith is often blamed for the woes of capitalism, but to be fair to Adam Smith, he was a moral philosopher, which was really trying, and the role of finance was really to help build a better society. This decoupling has happened, and has happened in a very major way. one of the symptoms of this decoupling is actually the creation of money through essentially what they got fancy terms called quantitative easing, which is a fancy term for printing money lah, basically, which has resulted in a very unstable position whereby this growth in money supply has, much more than the growth in the real economic activity. That's just one part. On top of that, you got a banking system. For 1 ringgit or $1, basically you can issue $8. Something called the strategic, the statutory reserve requirement. This whole system, first is just now what is sometimes called fiat money, the creation of it, and there's a history to this. In the past, it was pegged to gold, the gold standard. But in 1971, Richard Nixon, the American president at that time, coming off the Vietnam War, basically the US finances was in a bad state, and he decided to go off this gold standard, which actually had very, very big effect on the global financial system. Because then they were allowed to actually print US dollars, and this is the world's reserve currency, without having to have gold as a backing. This is quite epochal in the history of finance. And even the likes of Alan Greenspan in the 60s wrote against this actually. So Greenspan was actually quite a traditionalist. Of course, later he changed his stripes. Long story. So if you track the growth in money supply from about 71 onwards, it went exponential. If you track the growth in real economy, for example, as proxy to trade, the growth was linear. So roughly trade grew 5-6% per annum, whereas money grew by exponentially. I think 30+%. But that's not the end of it. This is just base money. On top of that, you have a banking system that can create more money. Economists will call this M2 and M3 and so on and so forth. And on top of that, with the liberalization in investment banking, they created money on money, which is called derivatives. There's swaps, there's options, and then it became swaptions. It became, many derivative, and you talk about exponential on top of exponential. I'm not an expert, although we had to, study this paper of how to blow up the world financially, basically, when we did CFA. But to be fair, finance and a lot of the innovation in institutional finance also helped to create prosperity. It helped to reduce poverty. It brought financial inclusion to large masses. It did bring development, but it also brought, when it was hijacked, I believe by a relatively narrow group, and you have this problem. So a couple of years ago, I was invited, in fact it was in February 2015, to give a speech in London. Fajar Capital, one of our investee companies, does an annual lecture with Oxford Centre of Islamic Studies. So the title of my presentation was Reclaiming the Financial Commons. So if we believe that this whole area, what I call the aquarium is the financial system lah. This is the analogy. Dalam aquarium ni macam-macam fish, ada pokok, ada oxygen, ada everything. So the aquarium is the financial commons. There's something seriously wrong with this aquarium. Okay, it's toxic, it's polluted, macam-macam. There's not enough oxygen, the little fish are dying, etc., etc. How do we reclaim the financial commons? So at the heart of this, there's actually 3 basic ideas, which I'll go through quickly, but this is how I related this to the 12 ideas shaping Khazanah. Next, please. Okay, this is my tour lah, Datuk Sri. So mudah-mudahan, insyaAllah, I will complete this in due course. I will have to end at my home university, UTM. InsyaAllah, that will be the 13th lecture lah, so to speak. So we are about 5 out of 13 right now. Next. Okay, I think I covered some of this. Since after World War II, actually, Bretton Woods, as we know, was a system that was created, and I think the likes of John Maynard Keynes, the British economist, was quite instrumental in forming the system, created a post-war, arguably contributed to a post-war boom, whereby institutions like IMF, World Bank, and then United Nations was running parallel to that, right? The gold standard was basically the standard that was done. As I mentioned, an epochal event in 71 was when Nixon went off the gold standard. Round about 1980, the Stanford School for the professors here, McKinnon and Shaw, I think propagated the idea of financial liberalization. It coincided politically with Ronald Reagan and his supply side economics in the US and in Europe, in the UK in particular. Margaret Thatcher came to power. So the Thatcherite, Reagan kind of, and Milton Friedman, famous economist who kind of represented the Chicago school, where I think notions about market-based liberalization, privatization, some say it is on the right side of economics and so on and so forth, was the predominant world order. Development economics, for example, was probably put a little bit more to the side. Keynesian economics was put a little bit more to the side. So I would submit then the Asian crisis in 1998 was a precursor to a more larger global crisis, which is 2008, right, as we know. So 98, before the Asian crisis, the Baht crisis, we were part of that, one of the 6 countries that were hit. But you saw before that countries like Mexico, Turkey, Argentina. The 1980s was actually the whole Latin America debt crisis. Some authors have traced this. When money was created, they created the euro-dollar market. Some of the euro-dollar was recycled by getting essentially developing countries to borrow beyond their means. And this went to Latin America. I think if you read the economic Hitman, Sham, there was a book, very popular book. Some of it is a bit sensational, but I think some of it is true. That this thing was kind of sent out. Of course, some of this was politically linked to the agenda of the United States with changes in regimes in Latin America and South America and so on and so forth, right? So 98 was in a way the canary in the coal mine, as they say. This is an early indicator of something bigger. It's a topic in itself, but in my view, there were elements certainly of crony capitalism that contributed to the fall of Asia, of the Asian countries during the Asian crisis. And indeed, the work of Dana Harta, the work of CDRC in Malaysia, and later the work of Khazanah to go and clean up some of these companies and excesses was part of the work. But it was also true, I think, that global finance had gotten to be so unbridled, and liquidity and hedge funds can actually bring countries down to their knees. And this did happen. So that is also true. And therefore, Malaysia's, at that time, unorthodox measure of closing the financial economy by capital controls, I think was the right one, as long as we use that closing to go and clean up our system and then reopen again, and then put certain controls that we needed to put in. Next. Okay, again, I won't go through in detail, but some basics of finance, and I think my team compile not just from an Islamic standpoint, but indeed, I think there are many forums, as I understand, of comparing the approach to finance from various religious traditions, a form of comparative religion, I suppose. And indeed, we find that a lot of the principles, not all, of course, if not the same, I think there's similar threads. I think finance, in a nutshell, is supposed to serve society rather than society become financialized. I think this is the basic idea. Next. So I went back to read, or at least to live through, the work of Umar Chapra in this book, The Future of Economics. It's a very eminent Islamic economics professor, because I think we can only locate, or we should only locate, Islamic finance within the bigger notion of what is the purpose and how do we organize Islamic system in economics. And indeed, this is a political economy that Ibn Khaldun highlighted in Muqaddimah. I think I'm quoting Professor Chapra, the 8 wise principles of political wisdom, each one dovetail with the other for mutual strength. So the strength of the sovereign, the mulk, depends on the implementation of law, the Sharia. the rule of law. The Sharia cannot be implemented except by the sovereign. I think this is obvious. This relationship, they're all interdependent. But this is the S part. But the sovereign cannot gain strength except through the people, al-rijal. Yeah? And the people cannot be sustained except by wealth, al-mal. And indeed, the issues on the ground today, I think people are struggling with cost of living and very basic necessities. Ibn Khaldun put this in a beautiful framework, must be 600 years ago or thereabouts. And wealth cannot be acquired except through development, al-imarah. And development cannot be attained except through justice, al-adil. And justice is the criterion, al-mizan, by which God will evaluate mankind, and the sovereign is charged with the responsibility of actualizing justice. MashaAllah. So this beautiful circle of equity, as Umar Chapra puts it, I was reminded, so I had to go and dig up the old note somewhere, something I read. So thank you for making me learn again, Professor, because if not for this lecture, I probably may have forgotten and nak kena cari balik lah. But again, you professors, brothers, sisters, so where is finance in all this? I believe finance, certainly in number 4, preservation of wealth. Number 6, helping drive development. Yeah. In many of these other things, maybe indirectly, to make sure that the system of governance and management are done properly with integrity, etc., etc. It's certainly all in there. And I think a key learning that Ibn Khaldun has so beautifully put for us from 600 years ago is this thing is all interrelated. And therefore, so what do we do? I think 400 years ago, and I think it was 400 years ago, Shakespeare was born. This is the year of Shakespeare's birth. But 400 years ago, also, another famous author wrote the book Utopia. Sir Thomas More. I think they made a movie, A Man of All Seasons. Sir Thomas More wrote about utopia as an ideal. I've not read the book, I must say, it's very hard reading. But of course, we've read about the book. So my first point on Islamic finance, very clear that this is all interrelated. We must locate finance in its proper place to serve the circle of equity, if you like. So, but how the hell do we do this when my point is that we're trying to chase utopia, but the world is dystopian. Dystopia is the opposite of utopia, right? And why is the world dystopian? The world is dystopian not because, this has happened over many years. I just quoted Nixon, that's over the last 50 years, but you could argue it goes beyond that. I understand from my colleagues who read these things that indeed I've read the review, one of the best books, one of the growth industry after the Lehman crisis is the publication of books. Everybody is an expert now, they want to explain what the hell happened, right? But apparently one of the most scholarly studies is something by Ken Rogoff and Carmen Reinhardt, right, from Harvard University, who basically, the book title this time is different. It's about the history of debt, basically over 500 years or something like that, right, over long periods of time. This chart is a bit small on the screen, on the top right-hand side. But basically the point, you saw this peak from about, actually went up the red line from round about 1970, 1980, what I described just now. When you pump the system, the aquarium, with so much excess liquidity and the wrong kind of liquidity, naturally the system, the aquarium becomes pretty fragile, unstable. And if you were to track this, you can argue about causation, but the frequency and the amplitude of financial crisis increased manifold during this time. That's one. The solution to this financial crisis, quote-unquote solution, was to print even more money. The reason, because this money will raise some of the fish, the asset prices even higher, but the ones who suffer are actually the little fish. And this is the problem now that you're seeing, which is one the result. Again, I'm not a professor, I can't prove this, definitively, but this is as a practitioner. We're seeing this tension coming in the form of inequality. Take a very simple example. Several years ago, I was privileged to be somewhere in the middle of the desert in Saudi Arabia. This place was actually called the Empty Quarter. I think there's an Arabic name for it, which I cannot remember. And I was sitting with Saudi Aramco, which now Prince Mohammed bin Salman wants to list. If they ask my advice, I would say don't list, but never mind. They don't ask my advice. It's supposed to be 3 trillion US dollars. The empty quarter is called empty because it must have been named before they found oil. I think apparently about 25% of the world's oil reserves is there. So I happened to be having a cup of tea with the CFO of Saudi Aramco, a very large company. And I said, Brother Abdulaziz, how much do you make a year? He said, we are not listed, so we don't I cannot tell you this number. I said, okay. The sun was setting. And then finally he said, you know what? Goldman Sachs makes more money from oil, this was several years ago, than we do. I said, that's impossible. He said, yes, it's true. I said, wow. So maksudnya, in the area of a basic necessity like oil, the world's largest oil company, the world's largest investment bank, Goldman Sachs, was making more money off oil than the world's largest oil company. Something has gone wrong, right? Speculation, I believe a little bit of speculation or forecast is required to fuel the economy, but this is completely excessive. I think this is one of the problems. Now, the problem of trying to achieve utopia is my question bawah tu. The genie hantu ni dah keluar. Is the genie is already out of the bottle. So what do you do? I have no solution. I'll state up front later. I can, within my domain in Khazanah and our companies, we struggle every day, inshallah, but we try to do things. But we are a fish or fishes in the aquarium. The aquarium itself, for example, they talk about deleveraging, doesn't really happen. When the US blew up in 2008, what did they do? They created something called TAP, right? What does TAP stand for? Cannot remember. Anyone? Troubled Assets Recovery Program, TAP. Fancy term. What it means is they issue more money. It's supposed to help economy. Instead, it went to bail out many of the Wall Street banks who were the source of the problem in the first place. Sorry to say. I worked for one or two of them. Before my remission is really, I work in investment research. Was really trying to discover capital allocation. Jadi, so when that happens, Detroit, for example, which yesterday was supposed to be quite critical, the state of Michigan, the Rust Belt, voting. Detroit hardly got any money, not much money, and apparently you go down there, it's like a war zone, macam post-nuclear Holocaust place. So within the American system, I think there's great inequality. But before we start slamming the Americans, we got to look at ourselves too. There's great inequality here in many places. Having said that, I think our research institute has come up with some numbers about social mobility. It's quite interesting, another subject. Okay, then the next slide. This I don't think I need to elaborate. I think before many of you here do work here, but I think for completeness, Islamic finance principle, I think prohibition of what is wrong dari segi riba, gharar or maisir. Again, I won't drill down. I think you will know better. But I see the prohibition of do no harm, to remove pain, to remove oppression as only one part. Itu baru first part, right? The nahi munkar part, right? So, but we must go beyond that to do good. So this is what can Islamic finance do in the real economy. The Amar Ma'ruf, if you like. So my first point is, I got only 3 main points. The first point is, how do we create this utopia in a dystopian world? So I parked that for a while, and I declare I don't have the full answers of the aquarium, and but it is a problem of the commons. It affects all of us. The second part is that Islamic finance, in my view, is not part of the problem. It doesn't add to that problem, or at least doesn't add substantially. But let's be clear, we're not yet part of the solution. Before we celebrate ourselves too much, I'll be the first to admit. First of all, numbers. By some estimation, Islamic finance is $1 trillion US dollars, but that's about 1% of the global financial system. It's growing fast. People come and, including some of those same firms, come and put, Muslim names or Arabic names to their banks. That's just labeling, right? And we create products, banyak labeling, we know, but let's not be too cynical either. I think we must be skeptical, but we shouldn't be cynical. There's a difference. Jadi, so the point is this lah. Maybe this is best described by a former colleague of ours at Khazanah, Brother Hisham. Hisham is a UK national. He worked for HSBC Amanah, joined us, and decided to be now he's full time at Hjkff as both a tutor and a student actually. So Hisham, I thought, described this best. He said Islamic finance must not be like halal fried chicken. Dia kata. I said, how is that, Brother Hisham? He said, it's halal because it's slaughtered in the right way, etc., etc. But it's not very good for you. Because fried chicken kan, it's not particularly healthy. So dia kena HT lah, halal dan tayyib lah kan, halal tayyiban. So kena, I think the current state of Islamic finance is perhaps best described is halal lah, betul lah, permissible, right, halal. Is it tayyiban? Maybe not, or not enough. I think this is I think summarizes this slide. So from Khazanah's framework, next slide. Sorry, the two caveats just now was, so I said we're part of the, not part of the problem with two caveat. The two caveat, one is size. We're still small. So how we can't solve the aquarium because we're like 1%. Walhal, if you take the combined wealth, supposedly not necessarily income, of Islamic country is much more than 1%, right? If you take a listing of, I don't know how many sovereign states are there, 200 countries. Sham, Nick, 200 countries. Now, I've always wondered, this must be a riddle Allah Ta'ala has set us, the Ummah. I believe there are 56 OIC countries or thereabouts. But if you tengok the list of 200 or so, many from wealth, not necessarily income or innovation or whatever else, many Muslim countries, atas tu, wealth from oil, Brunei, but Qatar, Abu Dhabi, Emirates, apa semua. And then you tengok at the bottom pun many Muslim countries, right? In between, okay, you got Malaysia, you got Turkey. Now I ask myself, surely this is a riddle. Allah Ta'ala, He would have given us, the conditions for, you have wealth, you have human capital, you have good governance, all these things. You can make a great country on your own lah. But I think, at least I'm allowed to speculate in a good way, I hope, that Allah Ta'ala must have spread this round because He wanted us to get to know each other and work together, right? My colleagues remind me Surah Hujarat. I can't remember which verse, but I think I defer to the professors, that Allah Ta'ala created us into nations and tribes so that we may know each other dan semarakkan all of us. In fact, we read this surah, this verse, annually during the World Islamic Economic Forum. There is a session called the Khazanah Breakfast Roundtable. So we try to bring our partners and investee companies and sometimes ministers, policy makers into a room over breakfast and we discuss. We start by reading the surah because trying to bring everybody together. But so really the role of finance then, what can we do? So if we believe, one, we should not be part of the problem, should not add. So where we can, we practically do all our funding in permissible halal structures, not just by Malaysian standards. I think one of the issues is harmonization of standards, but by stuff that is also acceptable in the Middle East, so global standard. In the process, actually, we believe we've played our part somewhat to do that. There's a brochure that you be part of your deck that my team has done to explain. Over the years, we've developed many sukuks which were deemed so-called groundbreaking. I mean, I don't want to talk too much about that, but really, this was about harmonization of standards and taking to another level. Example, when one of the first sukuks that we did, bankers came in and said, "Oh, this has to be LIBOR based." LIBOR is the London Interbank offer rate. So it's the interbank rate in London, LIBOR. It's an interest rate basically. I said, actually, hang on a minute. Why must this Islamic structure be based on LIBOR or any interest rate? But I thought, no, this is how it's done. It's got to price money. I said, wait, this one doesn't quite make. And by the way, this will have to cost you a bit more than conventional structure. I kata, ni macam mana ni? This doesn't make sense. Right? I said, okay, don't come back or only come back when you can come back with anything. I don't want LIBOR, and it has to be cheaper than so-called conventional, because I think, efficient cost of funding is very Islamic. So I tell these Islamic bankers, this is about 12 years ago. So they went back sheepishly, the tail between their legs, so to speak. And then actually with my team, before Izani was part of that team, Dato' was part of that team. Before that, Shahnas, a lady, very fierce lady, who was our first CFO. Shahnas helped to do all this, and today this is industry standard, alhamdulillah. So we based it on the dividend rate of the underlying share, the asset is asset back, which is telecom share. So telecom, it depends. Sometimes naik, sometimes turun. So we believe we managed to do it. Of course, working with Islamic scholars and so on. But that's only one part, right? I would say at best that's 20% of what our work is, because the great majority of our work is in equity investing. And thank God we're doing equity investing. We don't do derivatives. We don't do money on money. We do equity investing. Now, so this is the part about doing no harm is not enough lah. Okay, next. Which is, okay, so this part then, inside here we highlighted there are 7 roles that we play in Khazanah, which I think is highlighted here. If not, I will read it out. One is as an issuer of sukuks, for example. Number 2, we invest in Islamic financial institutions. So I mentioned tadi Fajar Capital was something we work with the founder of HSBC Amanah, Datuk Paduka Iqbal Khan, who was, I think last year was awarded the Royal Award for Islamic Finance from Malaysia. So Brother Iqbal, I think our vision is really trying to connect various parts of the Ummah to help fund real economy, and we're doing that. The third, as a domestic catalyst, for example, tadi I gave some example about Iskandar, about creating creative industry, education hubs, renewable energy, etc. Number 4, as a shareholder of GLCs, we actually drive our GLCs to convert their financing to make sure it's more Islamic lah, Zani. Not complete yet, but getting there lah. InsyaAllah, certainly banyak dah tukar. Then as a regional catalyst, I think we work and invest into countries like Indonesia, we invest into Turkey, into Saudi Arabia, but also it's a two-way flow. Kemudian in education and capacity building, I think we are working with MIFC, with Oxys, with Hjkff, hopefully in future with UIA as well, insyaAllah. And finally, as an investor in Islamic finance product. Jadi, these are some of the roles. So maybe I should just complete a little bit more. Next. And this is a timeline of the various activities. I also mentioned we got triple bottom line. Jadi kita pun banyak buat, the funding, for example, of some of our CSR work. We've tried to innovate with, for example, last year was the first, or is it this year? Last year, the first socially responsible investment punya sukuk that we did to raise money for trust schools education. Next. So the final point, number 1, yes, we're trying to achieve utopia in a dystopian world. 2, Islamic finance, I submit, thankfully, alhamdulillah, we do not generally add to that very dystopian world. However, that's only one part, right? We are not quite part of the solution yet, because we're small and because we are actually concentrating too little on the equity based side. There's a lot of focus on the debt and liability side. And the Islamic system is actually complete, shumul, it's complete. That, the NBFIs, for example, the non-banking financial institution, from Hjkff to Zakat, Hibah, and so on and so forth. Right? It's a very complete system, which I think we're only beginning to tap parts of it. So the big opportunity, in my view, is actually this has become mainstream, either because at an intellectual level, if I could call it that. Economics, I think there's a lot of debate. If I take one indicator, Khazanah is a member of the World Economic Forum. So I'm honored to represent Khazanah in the country. We are part of this group trying to look at inclusive growth, right? And actually they are studying on how we measure triple bottom line, etc. I can share, I think the world is completely lost, actually, how to change this aquarium. all these big name, and everyone's struggling. It doesn't mean they're not trying. To be fair, everyone's looking and everyone's trying. I think the big opportunity is that you have people questioning the role of economics in itself. If the elite, whether in political office or in corporate boardrooms or in citadels of academia, do not get their act together, the public is already voting in a very major way. People are, they're not in, people, we know this, right? I think I don't have to repeat. Jadi, so my view is that there is a big opportunity for solutions. Take affordable housing. I mean, it is unaffordable. That's why you have affordable housing, and it's not just Malaysia, right? Everywhere you go in the world, and this is one of the paradox of development. Why? Because development seems to be favoring only a certain class. Karl Marx was actually very right. He was a very astute student of capitalism. He was very good at diagnosing the problem. He predicted capitalism will break up if you go on like this. But it was very wrong in the solution. Communism is not the solution, right? We know that. Now the answer is somewhere in the middle. Islam is indeed the middle way. And how do we find that? I think, so our job is trying to look at specifics, right? Here are 11 examples, social business example, trust schools, where we measure not just financial outcome, but certainly strategic and other outcome. The investment style itself, we say we do no harm, we do some good, we do more good. So the pepatah Melayu, buat baik berpada-pada, buat jahat jangan sekali. I think it's a very wise one. We try what we can, we do, but and there's something called impact investing, which is number 3. This is actually an interesting company. 89-90, so after about 5 years of me, the CEO Khazanah, jumping up and down, screaming, "Oi, mana dia?" I asked to go and look at affordable housing and create the new affordable housing. A bit slow frankly, because our company is slow. There's a new concept to create really affordable and inclusive housing. Then I asked my team, go around the world, go and try and find, where can we find? So we found this company in Philippines. 89-90, they make affordable houses. The entrepreneurs themselves came from the slums in Philippines. 96% of their customer base got no bank accounts. This company is growing at 40% per annum. Their return on capital is 40%, and their share price was up 40% until recently. Today I even checked after yesterday. And so I said, wow, dia punya CEO nama dia Jesus, Jesus. So I said, is this the prophet or is this the CEO? So sorry, no, of course it's not the prophet, but mana tahu kan second coming. Jadi, so I invited him to KL. He gave a talk. I brought him to the Prime Minister. I said, sir, you should listen to this man because he has done all this. We need to solve all this thing. So our research institute, Dr. Suraya, who was formerly at University Malaya, Suraya did a report on affordable housing. Amazing. Not all of it can apply to us. This is really what, bottom of the pyramid. I'm amazed at this company. MashaAllah. So imagine I kata, go and create 89-90 in education, in healthcare, this whole thing called impact investing. Further down, maybe not here, there's a company called Bima. I think next slide. Can you just show the next slide? Yeah, I wanted to highlight Bima kat bawah tu. Bima is a Swedish company that we happen to find. What they do is as follows. They sell micro insurance. I don't think they call it Islamic. I may be wrong, but I think it certainly has very good social utility. They sell through mobile phone platforms. So how we discover is because our Aziata tadi in Bangladesh, in Sri Lanka dengan Celcom, Bima was selling micro insurance through those companies, our phone companies, as follows. Dia kata, if you stay with this particular provider, Celcom di Malaysia, Dialog di Sri Lanka, Robi di Bangladesh, for 6 months, the 7th month, we meaning the company, the phone company, will pay $1 per month in terms of insurance premium. For people who basically got no insurance, their lives are, but now, everybody's got a mobile phone, but they don't have insurance. They don't have many basic, but they got a mobile phone. So this is so-called win-win-win, right? We win because we get to retain customer, because in the industry there's something called churn, which is a very expensive thing. The Bima gets to make some premium, and the customer gets insured. It's financial inclusion. I kata, wow, why didn't we think of this? So I told my guys, hey, benda ni ada, what are we doing? So now Axiata actually has invested in this company. They are, when I saw them a few months ago, they were already touching 19 million subscribers in many countries. The famous example in Kenya of M-Pesa, people leapfrog. So using technology, I think is extremely Islamic, right? We should use all the facilities given to us. Alipay, we invested in Alibaba. Alipay, different company, they got something called 310. So, I just came off China, PM, I think we sat down with Jack Ma. So, Jack kata 310. What is 310? In 3 minutes, you will get an answer when they apply for a loan lah. Again, this loan is probably not Sharia structured, but I wanted to illustrate the point of what can be done. And it's up to us to go and modify this to be even better, right? In 1 second, you can take your money out. Zero human interface. What do? They use data, actually, lots of data. And 5 million people have gotten this. People who could not get financing from banks. I think many banks have lost their way in the sense that they're not serving actually people who these are actually smallholders. Smallholders. Of course, Grameen, Dr. Yunus, some say maybe controversial lah, apa panjang cerita, but the notion of empowerment through microcredit. So there are many examples. I'll stop there to say that while we are trying to chase utopia in a dystopian world, we have a duty, obviously, to chase that utopia, right? Whether we succeed or not, trying to do the right things right in the right way is actually beyond us lah. I'm sure we know we're going to be judged by our effort and our skill in trying to chase that utopia. Islamic finance, before we get too smug, I think has done a lot. But before we get too smug, as I said, I believe while it's not adding a major part of the problem because it's still small, we're really just beginning to scratch parts of the solution, and part of the ways forward I tried to highlight and tried to share the work that we're doing. So with that, once again, I thank Dr. Sri Zaleha and the team, and end with wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Honorable Tan Sri, for the informative lecture and for sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us. Honorable Tan Sri, may I request you to remain on stage for the question and answer session.
Can I put some of my colleagues on the spot and invite them to? Dr. Izani, Dr. Isham and Farouk, members. I think our senior leadership team is berapa orang? About 17, 18 people. There's 4 of us here. 19, sorry. Okay, so there's about a quarter.
Testing.
Prof Hassan is here. Okay, great. So why don't we get one more chair for Prof? No, Prof, why don't you come?
We would like to invite Prof Aslam to moderate the question and answer session.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. It's now 1 p.m. I know lunch is on the minds of everybody, but we cannot let this session go without some questions and hopefully good answers from our panelists. I would like to straight away, yes, please just introduce yourself and your question, and please be as brief as you can.
My name is Abdullah. I'm from the KSEP. I was very interested in this because when you talk about Alipay, you are referring more on fintech. So where do you see the cryptocurrency and bitcoins coming as far as the future of currency in this case here? And how do we in the Islamic finance play a role in this particular case?
Okay, we'll take three at a go. So, Dr. Zul?
Assalamualaikum. Thank you, Tan Sri. I would like to know on the affordable housing. I understand the Khazanah Institute has done some work. So we would like to share if we can. Thank you, please.
Okay, third one, I'm going to go with, are you a student? Okay, so student, please, Dr. Ridwan, we'll go the second round.
Hi, my name is Daniel. I'm a third-year law student from Faculty of Law. My question is that nowadays a lot of people has been complaining that the price and the cost of living has increased tremendously. And one of the proposition that has been proposed by us and also by the opposition is that they should abolish toll. However, many people fail to understand that Khazanah actually has interest in Plus Berhad by 51% of share via UEM Berhad, right? Now, it's almost impossible to abolish toll unless you compensate the sukuk holders. I believe that Plus Berhad has issued sukuk worth 30 billion ringgit to the sukuk holders. Now, for the benefit of the society, or since you're in IIU, I would like to call it Ummah, yeah? For the benefit of the Ummah, is it possible to compensate the sukuk holders via the Plus Berhad asset, currently that Plus holding the asset for the benefit of the society? Is it possible to do that?
Okay, thank you very much. We've gone 3 questions.
We group in 3 questions with dengan Nizin. Thank you. Very, very good question. I think the first one, Professor Abdul Wahab, I think the the short answer, I think fintech should be studied carefully. I think it is a force for good. It can be a force for bad. If I may take some examples. Not sure whether anybody heard of a company called Wonga.com, W-O-N-G-A, Wonga.com. I think they had the misfortune of sponsoring Newcastle United, among other things. But this is a terrible company actually. So a friend of mine, a Spaniard, who shall remain unnamed, but was actually approached to be chairman of this. I said, Juan, my advice to you is don't do this because this is a terrible company, the little I know. Basically, their annualized rate of interest they charge is something like 3,200%. This is what they call payday lending. So kalau orang tu duduk dekat bar or something and he doesn't have cash, he can go on his mobile phone and get £50 or whatever top up, but the interest rate is effectively 3,000% or something like that. And these companies exist, right? And Wonga is very clever technology, by the way. They do macam-macam lah, data lah, apa benda semua. Or it can be a force for good. The Alipay example was one. As I said, I've not fully studied, but the power of that is quite clear. Crowdfunding, I've seen in San Francisco, they do apa? For example, community. So to create better social capital, trust within the community actually, if they know each other, they have one advantage among others lah. Information. So dia tahu, dia pergi kedai ni, dia jual cupcake for example. They know these fellows, the lady serving this good service, they're doing it properly, it's clean, it's creative, nice ambience, etc. It's good. Tinggal they cannot compete dengan maybe the big chains. And they need say $20,000 to raise to I don't know, to tambah dia punya kedai or something like that, right? To clean up. They could go to the bank many tak layan, too small. But also maybe the community, and this is happening in parts of San Francisco, for example. The community say, I like this. In fact, there's a lot of rich people in the community who value these artisanal shops. This builds the fabric of their community, and they do community lending. That's a fancy name of doing, I don't know, in our traditional societies, sama ada orang buat kutu ke apa ke, it's a way of what they call it, coming together, right? I'm sure the Kelantan in many places, or indeed Tabung Haji was a form of financial innovation, right? And so on. So to me, we should use technology to increase that for sure. Yang kedua, the Bitcoin, all this, I must admit, I'm not fully conversant. Maybe some of my colleagues can help. Azul, our guy Zul, who's in charge of financial services, has studied this in some detail. I think it's a novel idea. which is trying to bypass the issue of currency and the problem about reserve currency and printing money, etc. Right? There was a group that was looking at gold dinar, for example, including some of the professors from here. I think the basic idea that fiat money you can't simply print because you will create essentially a very unstable financial system, which is part of what my submission today. So, however, this system has been jammed out for various reasons. And I wouldn't be surprised, frankly. Even in the tech world, for example, PayPal, which is being used. PayPal actually was a very relatively early fintech innovation. And frankly, when we talk to Jack Ma, his loan book has grown to $100 billion. But who are the people that he will disrupt? These are the big banks in China, naturally. I think similarly, PayPal was a disruptor to the banking system per se. And banking system, if they're clever, they need to reinvent themselves to serve the public and the real economy. Otherwise, people will reject. This force is just too strong. Affordable housing, Dr. Zul, yes, I think we can make arrangements. In fact, this deserves its own lecture, and Dr. Suraya can come and a team. And Nick, Imran, we arrange for Dr. Suraya to come at some point and the team from Khazanah Research Institute. The last question, Daniel, is a very good one. I think in fact, one can debate whether public utilities like a highway or electricity or water should indeed be privatized. Should I stop for Azan or boleh continue? Okay, sorry. So insofar as in the case of PLAS, we recognized this several years ago. Now, whether this is enough, we can debate. That we inherited this highway, which I think has created a lot of, economic return to the country because it connected the country 1,000 kilometers. But yes, it was also a burden. But we inherited this from the Renong restructuring back in 2001. Jadi Renong, I think they did a good job to build this highway. Unfortunately, they had a lot of hutang. In fact, 26 billion ringgit worth of debt. Before my time, Khazanah inherited this after the Asian crisis, and we really had to restructure. So one of the major assets was really the PLAS highway, right? So we listed this with a certain toll structure. It was important, which was benchmarked on regional and so on and so forth, whatever rates that was felt to be reasonable, and the profit that they were making was not like gila-gila punya profit, was reasonable profit. As I said, arguable whether you think one could argue, for example, Tenaga should give, if not free electricity, but very cheap electricity, right? Because it's a basic necessity, or water, and this is a field that can be debated. But this was what we inherited. Over the years, we recognized that not just it had sukuk holders, it was listed, it was equity holders. So Khazanah decided, and thankfully we did that, I think, 5-6 years ago, we said this one tak boleh sustain. Either the public cannot bear this, the toll rate punya structure that was part of the privatization agreement, or so if that doesn't go up, because the political masters may say, I don't want to raise this year, they're supposed to compensate the company, but government finances itself, more so now, was really very tight. And thirdly, if we hurt the rightful owners, the equity holders or the sukuk holder pun, it's a form of injustice because they went in there with a certain akad, a certain contract to own the shares and own the sukuk punya ni pun tak boleh. So we got this triangle. We actually drew a triangle, and Khazanah was in the middle of this, right? So I said, what can we do? And in fact, this was one of our largest and most challenging restructuring. So what we did was we said, even Khazanah cannot do this. The only party I thought that could do this was Khazanah and EPF. The reason is Khazanah has a certain target, that's our mandate of return. EPF has a lower target for lower risk. So the assets were relatively lower risk. So what did we do? We slashed toll rates. But to do that, we had to take it private. We had to compensate the equity holders properly. Kalau tidak, dia marah. Betul lah, it would be an injustice to them. And then we funded this through issuing sukuk, the one that you mentioned, a lot of sukuk. But the majority of that sukuk was actually purchased by EPF. the great majority, and some by co-op. Jadi duit tu tak lari, dia pergi kat situ. And who owns EPF is 12-13 million depositors. So Alhamdulillah, and when my team did this, I said, guys, don't get too excited. Believe me, this is a long and winding road and highway. There will be 30 twist sentence. Dia kata, boss, really, what do you mean by 30? You tengok lah, sure ada. Yang ni orang ni mengamuk, orang ni kan opposition cakap, sure ada. In the end, they counted 29. It took us 3 years. 29 twist sentence. Menangis. Some of my staff, you know who they are, not on this table. Menangis, literally menangis, because they were so affected, and it was very difficult, because you imagine, you got to, satisfy public. Now, I'm not saying it's perfect, because today, the toll rates are much lower than what's in it. In terms of alternative, 99% of the plus highway are the alternative route. Of course, Jalan Lama lah. It's not the same as ni, and then level of service, right? Level of service, kadang you bayar toll, tengok, jam, etc. lah kan. Of course, dia kena tambah, etc. I accept. I mean, it's a debate we have discussed. In fact, the person who was writing this for DAP replaced me as head of research. Apa nama that guy at Citigroup? Chang, whatever, cannot remember. Whatever. Tay Chi Chong. He worked as head of research for Solomon Citigroup, where it was my job. And then he went and became the DAP think tank lah. He should know better actually. Because for example, kalau free, then what about the people yang naik Mercedes, who can definitely afford this? I think there should be. So whether one believes for such public need, there must be user pay lah. So to me, my view is it must be reasonable. It should not be excessive, but service kena bagus, etc. lah. And I mean, similar case you could argue for electricity lah, and for that matter fuel lah, banyak lah cerita. So maybe Zani wanna add some?
Well, perhaps I can mention our initiative and so just to elaborate further. I think it's on, because Tansi was mentioning the challenges that we have in this financial times. I think for us to progress further in the area of Islamic finance, I think one thing I noticed and what we have been encountering in Khazanah, you need a lot of patience and passion in this area, because a lot of challenges. If you're not patient enough, you'll be engulfed and you will not be able to continue your mission. So that's why I think Alhamdulillah for us in Khazanah, Tansi has led this to adopt Islamic finance mission very early when we came on board in 2004, 2005. And it took 10 years for us to really make an impact, at least in the small area we're doing in liability management. Of course, in equity as well, we're trying to do, at least to make sure that we become a model for others to emulate. I think, Alhamdulillah, our structure out there has been copied by many, which we are happy to share with others. It's about sharing and for people to adopt and continue our initiatives. Just to mention a bit more than when we did the social impact sukuk last year in 2005, it's very small. It's only 100 million ringgit that we raised to help our trust schools. But the impact to the people out there is huge. One, to the schools, to the students, and also the structure is out there ready to be copied by people to use for healthcare, for example, for infrastructure, for many other users. So we are glad that we were there to prepare the structure for people to use. So on one final note for me, I think on human capital development, it so happened that in Khazanah, I also have some involvement in CA program, Chartered Accountant program, which we are helping local graduates to pursue employment in UK. And Alhamdulillah, we have sent 12 local graduates already from local universities in Croydon. And I tell you, it's pleased to know that our students can do well. They do well in ICA EW exams, and they're scoring in the marks of 70s and 80s. And when people are only targeting for 50 to pass, and really, it's about giving opportunity to our local students to perform. And Alhamdulillah, we have the platform, and I encourage UIA students to apply for our DTCA program that's open every year. Thank you.
Terima kasih. I was informed that we have time for 2 more questions. In addition to, I'm going to abuse my position as chairperson and ask one. But before that, Dr. Zul, yesterday I happened to be, Tan Sri, at your Malaysian Capitalism Conference organized by KRI. And we will be inviting Dr. Suraya to come and talk about affordable housing here with us. Yeah? Professor Jomo is also adjunct professor in the Department of Economics. We are very thankful to the university because they granted it, I think, with open hands, despite his sometimes very critical views of things. So we take our hats off to the university. No, other universities would not necessarily have done that. Is Islamic finance sensible and real? I mean, if I can just ask that question. And I ask this because this academic and practice divide. Many academics have been quite critical of Islamic finance, and of course the industry defends its path. Yeah? So I see what you explained just now and what you said as really being the way for us to bridge that gap, where finance has to be put in its correct place. It has to serve not only the economic goals of society, but also the social goals of society. So do you think Islamic finance is sensible and real? So now the question there's one there, and I will go with Dr. Edwan because so please, you're the one.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Hjkff from MBA and MBA student. I believe monetary is a very hard of financial. Okay, and we are now having globally a paper money, which is a manipulated money, and those who up there can manipulate whatever they want, the currency. And whilst we see monetary in Islamic way, we see a gold, silver, rice, and grains, and basic commodity. What is the consequences in Malaysia if Malaysia policy they realize how crucial using Islamic money, which I just mentioned? What is the consequence? And also, if it's not possible, why try to example like Brexit? I mean, not Brexit, BRICS country, how they together to fight the system. Thank you.
I believe the question is about the possibility of going beyond fiat money, right? There will never be a session without this question in it. So, and the last question maybe to our Dr. Edwan.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh. My name is Dr. Ridwan. I'm with the Kuliah of Economics and Management Sciences. To give some background to my question, we have a DBA program and we regularly invite CEOs. There was a CEO who came, I think last year, and he shared his experience. And basically he said, as a CEO, getting funding is critical, especially for small and medium enterprise. Unfortunately, a lot of the banks are willing to provide the funds, but they do not act as venture capitalists. So they always have this problem that they don't meet certain ratios and so on and so forth, and the bank is not willing to take certain risks. Honestly speaking, before coming to this talk, I imagined we were going to talk about sukuk, and I wasn't really interested. But then when I looked at your presentation, I realized that your vision is much greater than that, and alhamdulillah for that. Now, if you consider that the majority of jobs that are created and wealth creation comes from small and medium enterprises, and small and medium enterprises are finding it very difficult to access funding, is there a possibility for Khazanah to look at very good small and medium enterprises and fund them, but act as a venture capitalist rather than a banker? Thank you.
Okay, we'll give it to Tan Sri, but just maybe one slight correction.
I'm okay for time.
Financial wealth. Your point about most of the wealth is created by SMEs. Financial wealth, probably not. But if you talk about wealth in terms of the number of people involved, the jobs, etc., then you are right. So Tan Sri, I believe.
Yeah, thank you. I'll try to, link the various questions. Maybe something with Dr. Ridwan. Indeed, I think we are already doing some. In fact, the thesis, if we put that together, Islamic finance or real finance, or real, let's call it real finance, and Islamic finance, I think at the heart of it, surely is about risk sharing, about equity base. Hence, venture capital is one major form of that, right? So, surely our holy prophets, missions on trade missions were a form of venture capital, right? They put money together and with certain terms, certain objectives, and clear demarcation of roles and risk and reward, as opposed to risk transfer, which is basically what liability management and debt is about, right? So you basically transfer risk orang lain. So this is not a very brotherly or sisterly act. I think this is at the heart of that. So indeed, as I said, Khazanah, thankfully, our mandate is as an equity house. We basically make equity investments, whether we call it, categorization under direct equity or private equity or venture capital equity. But the SME is traditionally not an area we participate given our lineage. Traditionally, doesn't mean we shouldn't. In fact, I'll explain. Because we inherited companies that were formerly government companies or companies that got into trouble in the Asian crisis. But if you look at some of the models we're trying to do is to fund entrepreneurs who can help generate that. We cannot crowd out, which is obviously an issue for a state punya vehicle. The role of the state is to catalyze, to crowd in rather than to crowd out. And sometimes we are criticized for crowding out. Although I would argue some private companies are actually crowding out public interest. Cronies lah. And for example, Tenaga, IPPs were extremely one-sided, as you know. And we've been fighting that for many years. Now, the small, medium-scale industries, I think traditionally there were other institutions, for example, SME Bank. But indeed, one has to ask, is this an oxymoron, right? Can you be a venture bank? Doesn't quite make sense, right? In fact, one of the gentlemen, I believe in Islamic finance or in Islamic economic, Tariq Diwani, some of you may be familiar with his work. Brother Tariq is UK based. He wrote the book The Problem with Riba, something like that. He basically argued, Islamic banking itself is an oxymoron because of fractional reserve banking, the creation of money. So on top of fiat money, we create more money. I mean, this is a view that is contested lah. I don't know. But so whether you can actually have Islamic banking. Now, my view, as mentioned, the first wave of Islamic finance in this country was the creation of Islamic Bank, Bank Islam, right, in the 80s, as we know. What I call the second wave is when sukuks were created to help the fund. But again, this is not complete. The third wave has to be macam ni lah, the stuff around venture, equity-based financing, some using fintech and so on and so forth. That has to be the third wave. And in that regard, we are already investing through creation of venture funds. So Axiata, for example, and us have created a fund for basically SMEs, with the majority of that, I think, allocated to Bumi Muslims and so on, to do applications for the mobile industry, as an example. I think we actually have allocation. We're trying to find the right models to go and create, for example, funds for ecotourism. These are not very big companies. Can do whitewater rafting and already happening lah. Some other did not expand and so on and so forth. So you're right. I think this is definitely an area. It's already happening. And by the way, you go to Silicon Valley, a lot of it is basically venture funding. It's not. They don't call it Islamic lah. But if you think about it, that's why it is. Or you go, I suppose, in the souks in Fes or Marrakesh or what was once in Damascus and so on. This was all the system of venture funding. So certainly on monetary paper money, it's a big area. I think there are, as I said, right up front, I don't have the solution. I tried to define the problem, which is basically this dystopian aquarium that we talk about. But I think within that, there are things we can do. We don't add to the problem, number one. That means you don't, basic things like, don't over borrow, keep within prudential limit, don't waste, don't, spend beyond your means. I mean, eradicate corruption, macam-macam. There's so many things. This is at the corporate level, the national level. And then, but you know, I know there's been work. For example, there are some technicalities about, you know, how do you move away from using US dollar, as an example. As we know, oil is, you know, major commodities are denominated US dollar. So there was a movement to do clearance between countries. So trade within OIC countries, for example, is pretty small. But actually we need to trade with everybody, you know, frankly. And of course, where we need, we work with the Ummah as defined, right? So again, I won't be able, Zaki, to answer in great detail. So BRICS, for example, you mentioned BRICS. I think BRICS countries have formed a BRICS bank, and the Chinese have formed the AIIB, as you know. Tan Sri Zeti, our former governor, is a board member. Jadi, I think this is an attempt at moving away from, you know, the US-dominated system as such, and the whole financial system. I think, to be fair, within the United States itself, I think you saw, you know, yesterday the voting actually reflects many socio-economic phenomena of where public is going, right? I think the one demonstration was in Oakland, which interestingly has one, Sacramento, Oakland, as one of the largest 10 cities in the world. You know, these are people with no houses in the same neighborhood as the dot-com billionaires. This is amazing phenomenon, but this is the United States. But so over there, societies are also finding their own grassroots solutions, actually. In fact, Shea Lorenzo and the US community, I believe they have a foundation called La Riba that works on these things. So, sorry if I can't answer that in full. Is Islamic finance sensible and real? I think surely it is in its ideal form, or at least in its idealized form. In its, you know, kalau setakat halal fried chicken is probably real, but it maybe not sensible. I don't know whether that answers. I'll stop there. Maybe guys wanna share?
Yeah. Thank you, Tan Sri. Yeah, I just want to comment on whether real and sensible, and referring to Tan Sri metaphor just now, halal fried chicken. So I've been trying to understand Islamic finance since 1990. I went to Purdue University and I worked in the US, and the first time trying to read at the basement in Indiana University. So I told Dato' Izani, I'm still studying. You know, I'm still not sold on the, you know, this Islamic finance, and it's perhaps professor, hopefully one day, you know, God will open my mind. So my view is very simple, right? And for the students out there, again, is I tend to focus on investment decision, right? Financing decision to me is no-brainer. If I get my investment decision right, as Tan Sri said, with financial returns, so strategic returns, right? And financing is where the conventional Islamic, you know, if you get your, I mean, to address Professor, if you get your investment return, you know, quite high, the financing will be there. And therefore, I think it's very, very Islamic when you are entrusted, whether you're CEO or the board, where you run the company efficiently and get the return, where shareholders, you heard EPF, 10 million members, PMB, ASB, and Quam, whatever it is, they get higher return, and then as a result, they can fund all the societal return, whether through cash or giving away some of this. To me, is where that is also very, very Islamic, right? And I mean, I worked in Samdabi before, and even Kazana. The focus on financing, you know, you save 10 basis point, the bankers will go to, oh, I save a 10 basis point, or I save 20 basis point. But if you get your investment return right, you can get 300% higher, or 3% higher. To me, that is very, very Islamic. So perhaps, Prof, is to think about Islamic finance in the broader sense that include the investing, you know, investment, the how, and it's also very, very Islamic to ensure that everybody get returns. So, and I've used to just declare, I've used Islamic product. I've structured Islamic product. First time I came here, I met Professor Daud Bakar and those kind of things. So I'm still a student, and but I tend to like to focus on the return aspect, as you said, Kazana role. financial, strategic, and societal returns. So I hope it's not too controversial in my comment.
I think maybe I just also want to add another point. I think because here we are in a gathering of very learned people in the field of Islamic finance, which I think as Tan Sri touched on earlier on takaful. Because I mean, if we talk about Islamic banking being or Islamic finance being 1% of conventional finance globally, the percentage of takaful, if you look at it in the global insurance, is even much smaller than that. And unfortunately, Malaysia was one of those forerunners in the field of takaful. But we've come up with several models. We moved from mudarabah to wakala and modified wakala, for example. But we seem to have stagnated there, and somehow we haven't broken out from the first generation or second generation models. So maybe this is something for us to think about. Microinsurance, as Tansi mentioned earlier, is one of those ways where we can get down to the communities with a more cleaner, transparent way of risk sharing. But we still have a long way to go, I believe. So something to think about.
All right, we've come to the end of our session. I'd just like to also mention something that in the last 2 days, we were told that Malaysian capitalism doesn't have a capitalist class as usually defined. But we have our GLCs and GLICs that play the role of the capitalist class in Malaysia. Now, if among others, Prof. Jomo, if Khazanah is a good representation of the GLC and the GLICs, because it has, then if Tan Sri Azman's presentation today is any indication of what our Malaysian capitalists can be, then I think we are on the right track. I just hope all the other GLCs and GLICs share the vision of Tan Sri Azman. Yeah? So I think with that, would you like to say something now?
I need to respond to that. I was going to leave it at that, but I said Prof. Jomo, who's a very dear friend and academic mentor, but in the good tradition of the student and the NIMAS, I think we're told to question, right? Sebagai kunci ilmu and all that. And by the way, my brother Hjkff, we agree and disagree on many things. This is one condition of working in Khazanah. We must agree and disagree, but don't be disagreeable lah. Ada beza. This is very important, right? Very, very important ilmu, which we learn from Prof. Kamal, among others. How to agree to disagree in the right way. It must be surely be the basis of knowledge, useful knowledge. Inshallah. So I would say one of those ideas is this balance between state and market. I think it's important, this aquarium. First of all, the aquarium is clean and proper, etc. And the aquarium must have, macam-macam diversity lah. Ada yang GLC, GLIC. We must know our place actually. Certain things we should not go in because one and other. Certain things ada market failure, right? You have to go in. And sometimes this change over time. You need to start something. After a while, I didn't have time to explain. For example, one entrepreneur we backed, at that time, young man, now not so young, called Cik Afzal, who's the CEO and owner of Time.com. This is a company that had failed for 12 years. Unfortunately, part of the Renong group. They were run by some friends of mine, but unfortunately, didn't quite work out. So we gave to Afzal. Afzal won this as a 34-year-old. Nobody knew him. I didn't know him. Kita open to bid, but at 34, he had quite a neat data management business, selling to the likes of Google and all this. And with his Malaysian-Chinese partner, so really one Malaysia lah, I suppose. It's a very good bunch. Young, no credentials, don't know any datos, don't know whatever, semua ni. Very nice, very good guy. So when we look at it, we say, wow, his business at the age of 34, 35 was worth maybe 30 million. Not bad for a 34-year-old. But he was trying to swallow our stake, which was worth 10 times more, 300 million. So we told him, don't go to the bank. We've seen too many people who went to the bank, including the first acquisition of Malaysia Airlines, Pernas, macam-macam. Because then you get all this burden of debt, then dia tak boleh buat kerja. So we said we created something called an earn-out structure. It's a fancy name of saying, okay, this is our asset, tapi you kerja, you claim in your presentation you can grow this company 20% a year. We said the first 8% is ours because we own this thing. Because then we can recover some of our losses like they dulu kan. Anything above that is yours. You pump in your 30 million punya ni, and within 5 years you're supposed to take control of this company. Within 3.5 years he took control. MashaAllah. And after 12 years, the 13th year it made a profit. 14th year made a profit. He started hiring people. I'm so happy. And then Afzal kata, please, Tan Sri, don't call this the Afzal model. You're putting too much pressure on me. So I shouldn't call it the Afzal model. But this model we're trying to find, in fact, we've gotten, in fact, in Synergy, right? Project Bolt, we just got an entrepreneur to come in. Again, another earn-out structure. So we're trying to use the divestment punya ni also to create entrepreneur. Why? Because this balance between state and market is a very important one. We can abuse our position by holding too much and too long, for sure. We can also be absent from our duties if we don't invest in the first instance and then invest long enough and groom and nurture this investment long enough. Jadi, so obviously it's a journey. I think we set the framework. We think that we need to work closer with academia, and alhamdulillah today, hopefully this is not the end, just the start. Frankly, I declare my problem is we tried cloning and I got banyak. You can see there's so many things to do. But my colleagues, sama-sama we will various parts. I think we are organized along those lines, from KRI to finance to human capital development and so on. So once again, thank you. Assalamualaikum.
Terima kasih. Tan Sri, we have a lot of sensible and real research going on in IIUM, and on behalf of all the academics, we look forward to Islamic finance from Khazanah, inshallah. Assalamualaikum.
Thank you, Tan Sri, Dato', for the answers given, and as well as Prof. Aslam, who has moderated the Q&A session. We'll move to our next agenda. May I invite Professor Dr. Abdul Aziz Berghouth to accompany the Honorable Rector, Professor Datuk Sri Dr. Zaliha Kamaruddin, on stage for the presentation of souvenir. Professor Datuk Sri Zaliha Kamaruddin will now present a token of appreciation to Honorable Tan Sri. As a special gesture, since Tan Sri is our alumnus, we would like to present Tan Sri the Alumni Touch and Go card, in which Tan Sri can access the library and sports facilities with this card. Thank you, Tan Sri. Thank you, Datuk Sri. And thank you, Professor Abdul Aziz. With the souvenir presentation, we have come to the end of the program. Once again, we would like to thank Honorable Tan Sri Dato' Azman bin Haji Mokhtar for spending his precious time with us today. Thank you, Dato' Sri Dr. Zaliha Kamaruddin, and thank you everyone for coming. May I now invite all the VIPs for some light refreshments. For students, could you kindly fill out the form provided in your